Hello everybody, this is Schizofreak here, and we're just going to go over a recap video talking about the Vengeful 1 deck here that we've been playing. So, first off, let's just try to give you a good look at the deck list. I'm going to move some of these sideboard cards over a bit so you can see them better. Move, damn you. There we go. All right, as I was saying, so this is the deck list we're playing. We've got 17 lands. We've got a total of 4, 8, 12, 16 cards that draw us cards. So first off, the 17 land bit honestly isn't that bad because of our 16 draw effects that are really cheap. Like Street Wraith just costs us 2 mana. Insolent Neonate just costs 1 mana. You know, I'm going to actually... Give me just a second. There we go. Okay. You guys have a bit bigger of a thing so you can see the card I'm focusing on. So as I was saying, Insolent Neonate costs 1 mana. Faithless Looting costs 1 mana. Cathartic Reunion is 2, and it's our most expensive draw spell. And then Street Wraith is literally just 2 life. We are honestly never going to cast this as a creature, I don't think. But one of the cards I'm least impressed with right now is Stinkweed Imp. And that might be simply because you don't want the dredge package in this deck. It honestly, I don't think is just that good. As one of the people in the Dredgevine thread over on MTG Salvation mentioned when we were discussing this, when he was discussing this list, Dredge is one of those mechanics where you go all in or you just don't run it. So it's one of those situations where you're going to be running like 12 Dredge cards, like 10 Dredge cards, kind of like the actual Dredge deck in Modern, or you're literally just not running any. Like the only exception is Life from the Loam decks, like the Seismic Assault decks, because they just need Life from the Loam to get more lands back. But that's a corner case, and like decks like this, I honestly don't think Dredge is good. So we're gonna be cutting the Stinkweeds out, which makes me kind of sad because Dredge is one of my favorite game mechanics. But it's honestly not a good card for this deck. So, what should we be running in its place? So we have a couple options. So first off is, I actually need to get these. First off is Collective Brutality. So, Collective Brutality isn't a draw spell, but it's another spell we can put in our deck which allows us to discard cards to make our hollow ones cheaper. And honestly, hollow one is the entire reason for this style of build for the deck. So I think Collective Brutality, like, it's a really good card. There's a reason it's like $15 on Magic Online. Yeah, I know I'm saying $15 is a lot. Whatever. It's a really good card, and it gives us some interaction in the deck as well. Because one thing we don't have right now is, like, we just have creatures, draw, and discard, and we're like, our opponent does stuff? What? We didn't know that our opponent could do things. I thought we were just playing solitaire Magic. All of our interaction is in the sideboard with us having Lightning Axes, Abrupt Decays, Ancient Grudge, Maelstrom Pulse. Hell, even Vengeful Pharaoh is technically interaction. But I think going and putting Brutalities into the main board might actually be a pretty good idea because it gives us a way for us to deal with our opponents. I mean, for example, let's just say against that Miracles deck we lost to. If we had had Collective Brutality for the third game, we could have gone and duressed him and gotten rid of that Terminus that won him, that he had in hand, that basically ended up winning him the game because we didn't draw enough creatures afterwards to be able to get through the Entreat the Angels he miracled into. Against Affinity. If we had had Collective Brutality, we could have killed the Ornithopter and gotten rid of something like if he had a Galvanic Blast in hand. Or we could have just drained for 2 even, to just keep us alive that much longer. So Brutality is actually a really good card in Modern, I feel, because it does a lot of things against a lot of decks. And like the biggest benefit is definitely that it is a discard outlet for us, which is huge. Now, the one thing I'm wondering is, do we have enough discard outlets? Do we have enough enablers without Dredge to make Prized Amalgam good? I think so far my answer is leaning towards yes, but part of me is still kind of on the fence. Because one of the problems with Prized Amalgam in this deck is that we want to be super aggressive. We want to be like smashing, just playing, like if we can, just like free hollow one, maybe play a Gravecrawler or a Neonate, get back as many Vengevines as possible. If they're low enough, get back Bloodghast and just frickin' kill them. Prized Amalgam is very slow in that it comes into play tapped at end of turn. But in that same vein, it is also a very reliable recursive creature. Simply because the only condition that needs to be met is a Bloodghast needs to come back, or we need to cast a Gravecrawler, or a Vengevine comes back. We have 12 cards in this deck that interact favorably with Prized Amalgam to make it really good. And I feel that one of my problems with Prized Amalgam in this deck so far is just that the deck isn't built optimally to support it. And I feel that adding Collective Brutalities might actually help with that. Now, another thing is, with Cathartic Reunion, I'm actually going to cut one of them, because it's one of those cards where you definitely want one every single game. You maybe want 2. There are a few corner cases where you want 2. Sometimes you don't want 2. Sometimes you just want to stick with having one Cathartic Reunion and then you're happy. As such, we're going to cut one. We're going to go down to only 3 of them. So we have 4 open slots in this deck right now, and we have a couple options. I've already mentioned Collective Brutality. Another thing we have is Edge of Autumn. So Edge of Autumn was a card I was trying out in the last league. For anyone who remembers, they're just the set of videos before, like, this set of 5, or 6 I should say, including this. And Edge of Autumn was weird. It was weird because there were times where we would sack a land to Edge of Autumn, being like, okay, we're in a position where, you know what, we don't need that many lands, so we just need to cycle more cards. So we would sacrifice a land, cycle with Edge of Autumn, and then be like, shit, we needed that land. What is wrong with us? And it's not that we needed the land that turn, it was like we needed it the next turn, or like the turn, or in like 2 turns kind of thing. And it's, the problem is that Edge of Autumn and Street Wraith are really the only cards that have a free cycling cost. Like, another one that was suggested to me was Gathon Raiders, which, I'm going to be honest, I don't like this card. I think it's crap. And the reason for that is because it costs 3 mana to cast it as a morph creature. If there was a way to get this down for less than 3 mana, I'd be like, yeah, let's run this thing, let's test this out, it's probably going to be sweet. But the problem with Gathon Raiders, even with just playing it as a morph cost and using it as like another discard outlet, I feel it's way too freaking slow. Way too freaking slow. Definitely another suggestion I've heard is, because we discard so much, good old Tasigur. Now, Tasigur is interesting. Because with Tasigur, it kind of has anti-synergy with this deck. It does and doesn't have anti-synergy with this deck. So first off, with Delve, there are a lot of cards in here you can be delving. You can be delving away Hollow Ones, Street Wraiths, Lotleth Trolls, Reunions, Faithless Looting, Neonates. We really only need these four guys up here: Gravecrawler, Bloodghast, Prize, and Malcolm Vengevine. Those are the only 16 cards we actually need in our graveyard. Any other card, we can be delving away with Tasigur. Okay, so that's good synergy right there. We can cast Tasigur for a black mana. Cool. And we can probably do it fairly consistently. Now, do I ever see us activating his ability? That is the question. And the ability has interesting synergy with the deck. On one hand, we don't want to be getting back cards like our Vengevines or Prized Amalgams off of Tasigur. That honestly just seems horrible. Like, activate Tasigur, mill 2 cards, our opponent puts a Vengevine back in our hand, we're like, ugh, why? That's horrible. I mean, because we have the mana to activate his ability, we are able to cast those Vengevines. But that's still not a good feeling. I'd rather have just had them in the graveyard and got them into play for almost free the next turn from casting like Gravecrawlers or something. But, at the same time, it has interesting synergy with some of our cards as well. So because we have creatures that come back from the graveyard, sometimes Tasigur just isn't able to. Our opponent isn't able to pick our recursive stuff because it's already back in play. In those instances, Tasigur can get us back things like Hollow One, like Street Wraith, Lotleth Troll, all these cards that we want to get multiple uses out of. Like being able to get back a Hollow One and then cast it is really good. Being able to just get back and cycle a Street Wraith seems pretty good. Get back a discard outlet via Lotleth Troll. We could maybe dump some more stuff in our hand with Cathartic Reunion. Obviously, I wouldn't want to run more than like one Tasigur. Like 2 would definitely be too much. 1 I think is the right number. But it's a card I'd definitely be willing to try and maybe see how that works. Now, I'm trying so hard to not come up with really bad cards to put in this deck. An example of really bad cards to put in this deck: Dangerous Wager. When I was first constructing this deck, I took a look at Dangerous Wager and I was like, oh, but what if I draw 2 Hollow Ones? And then the good player in my head went, but what if you have to discard 3? Or discard other good cards? So, you can't just run all the discard spells ever. Hang on a sec. Sorry, I had something caught in my throat. And you have to be careful with what you're running sometimes. Now, as for honestly, with these 4 slots, I'm probably going to pick up 1 Tasigur and 3 Collector Brutality, test those out, and see how I feel about it. And hopefully that works out for us, because I really like this deck. When it works really well. I just need to get it to a point where it has some decent consistency to it. Now let's talk about the sideboard. What's good and what's a dud. So far, I've been boarding in Abrupt Decay and Maelstrom Pulse almost every game, but that's to be expected. Like, 100% expecting opponents to bring in Graveyard Hate, and you need cards like Abrupt Decay and Maelstrom Pulse to deal with that hate. If you don't, you're just going to lose matches. Obviously, Ancient Grudge it's Ancient Grudge. It's a staple of the format. Every deck running red and green should just be running Ancient Grudge because affinity exists, as we learned in our 5th match. Lightning Axe is an interesting one. It's a horrible top deck when you have no cards in hand, but it's pretty good removal, honestly. It's incredibly good removal at like every other point in the game because it kills almost anything. Like it would kill every creature we've come across so far in all of our leagues, with the exception of Primeval Titan. We've only had one creature that Lightning Axe couldn't kill. And in fact, like, the only removal spell we have that could kill Primeval Titan is Maelstrom Pulse. Now, Knot of the Bone, I might want to go down to just one of them. One of my problems is Knot of the Bone is really good against Burn. But I'm just testing this deck in friendly leagues right now, and I can definitely see people playing Burn being more inclined to play in the competitive leagues. And honestly, the only matchup I've really been like, yeah, I need Knot of the Bone was our last matchup, our affinity matchup. And whether we had 2 or 1 Knot of the Bone, I don't think it really mattered because of just how good our opponent's draws were all the time. So, yeah. I might go down to just 1 here. I might actually go up to a second Maelstrom Pulse. That's one thing I'm considering. Because it seems like it's really good and has a lot of applications to it. But I don't know. We'll think about it. And then finally, there's the last 2 cards. You got 4 Leyline of the Void and 1 Vengeful Pharaoh. Leyline of the Void, holy crap. When we played against Dredge, and we're a graveyard deck, but we're a very light graveyard deck. We're like graveyard light. Like Bud Light, only good. And when we just played this against our Dredge opponent, they were just like, shit, I have to play Fair Magic. And Dredge as a fair deck sucks. It just sucks. There's no other way around it. So, not doing anything with these. I'm keeping the 4 Leyline in because they're really good. And honestly, if we ever play against a Grixis Death Shadow deck, 4 of these coming in. Screws up Tasker, screws up Gurmag Angler, screws up Snapcaster Mage. So good. It has a lot of applications in Modern, so we're definitely keeping with the 4. And the last one is Vengeful Pharaoh. Honestly, this is one of my favorite cards from when I played Dredgevine like 2 years ago or so. And I remember that this was fun sideboard to bring in against the, at the time, very popular and very good Amulet Bloom decks. And this is before Summer Bloom was banned. And the best part about Pharaoh is your opponent could go to kill you with their Primeval Titan, and they'd be like, we're giving it double strike. And I'm like, okay. They're like, you're dead. I'm like, no. First strike damage hits. Vengeful Pharaoh punches Titan in the face. He dies. Are you done? And it was always hilarious to see the look on my opponent's face when that would happen. But alas, I don't know how good Pharaoh is these days. He might be good, he might be horrendous, but it's just 1 slot in the sideboard, and he has yet to prove me that he's terrible. But in the same token, he has yet to prove to me that he's useful. So we will just have to see. Anyway, guys, thanks for listening. Hope I haven't bored your ears off. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.